This morning we've seen those German police officers searching derelict buildings in this large area of land. I've seen them moving a piece of specialist equipment that we believe is part of this geo-radar tool that they wanted to bring in and use to search beneath the earth in specific locations.
It's evidence that police have begun tangible searches for Madeleine McCann. They spent at least a day, according to a man we spoke to in the village, at least a day here at this rather large, the biggest of the 3 wells that they've been exploring. So they were here for a day, police, firefighters, with specialist equipment like ropes and harnesses. And although no images have emerged of what took place here, we got a very vivid description from the man who was driving past.
"18 years, 1 well, and the question that has haunted the world since 2007. A pale dawn mist clings to the scrubland overlooking Praia da Luz, Portugal. The camera glides low over parched grasses and thorny undergrowth, revealing a small clearing ringed by ancient olive trees. In the center, a circular stone well yawns open, its mouth half hidden by decades of overgrowth. 2 diesel pumps hum in the dawn chill, their blue hoses snaking into the well's depths like mechanical serpents. Muddy water bubbles to the surface in spurts, gurgling as it pours into awaiting troughs. This isn't some forgotten relic being restored for tourists. This is an active crime scene. June 2025. Portuguese investigators, working under a European investigation order from German prosecutors, have cordoned off this forgotten corner of the Algarve. They're draining a well that has sat undisturbed since the spring of 2007. The same spring, a 3-year-old British girl named Madeleine McCann vanished from a holiday apartment barely 600 meters from where these pumps now labor. Could the answers to the world's most haunting missing child case rest at the bottom of this shaft? That's what investigators are betting on, but to understand why they're here, why they've returned to this sun-scorched landscape after nearly 2 decades, we have to go back to the night that changed everything. May 3rd, 2007. A Thursday evening in the Algarve, and the air is warm with the promise of summer. The Ocean Club resort in Praia da Luz basks in golden light, its whitewashed apartments gleaming against the deepening blue of the Atlantic. This is the kind of place British families dream about: safe, clean, affordable. A place where you can let your guard down. Apartment 5A sits on the ground floor, its shuttered windows facing a small garden and a low wall that separates the complex from a public street. Inside, 3 children sleep in a back bedroom. 3-year-old Madeleine McCann lies in a single bed near the window, her distinctive right eye, marked by a rare condition called coloboma that makes her pupil appear keyhole-shaped, closed in peaceful sleep. Beside her, in a travel cot, her 2-year-old twin siblings, Sean and Amelie, breathe softly in the darkness. 50 meters away, their parents, Kate and Jerry McCann, sit at a table in the resort's tapas restaurant. They're with 7 friends, the group the British tabloids will later dub the Tapas 7. Laughter drifts on the evening breeze. Wine glasses clink. It's the kind of vacation night that feels suspended in amber, perfect and uncomplicated. But Kate and Jerry aren't careless. Every 30 minutes, one of them rises from the table, walks the short distance back to the apartment, and checks on the children. They peer through the patio doors, listen for sounds of distress, reassure themselves that all is well. Other parents in the group do the same with their own children sleeping in nearby apartments. It's a routine, a system, a way to enjoy adult time while staying vigilant. At 9:05 p.m., Jerry McCann makes a check. He enters through the patio doors, walks to the children's bedroom, sees all 3 sleeping soundly. He uses the bathroom, then returns to the restaurant. Everything is fine. At 9:30 p.m., one of the friends, Matthew Oldfield, offers to check on the McCann children while checking his own. He approaches apartment 5A, but the patio door is locked. He listens at the window. Silence. He assumes all is well and returns to dinner. At 10 p.m., Kate McCann rises from her seat. It's her turn. She walks the familiar path back to 5A, pushes open the patio door and steps inside. The apartment is quiet. Too quiet. She moves toward the children's bedroom, and that's when she notices it. The bedroom door, which they'd left slightly ajar, is now wide open. A strange detail, but not yet alarming. She pushes the door open further and looks toward Madeleine's bed. It's empty. Kate's heart lurches. She checks behind the door, thinking maybe Madeleine has gotten up to use the bathroom or is hiding as a game. Nothing. She looks in the twins' cot. They're still sleeping, undisturbed. She rushes through the apartment, checking the other bedroom, the bathroom, the kitchen. Her voice rises, calling Madeleine's name. Still nothing. Then she sees it. The window in the children's bedroom is open, the shutters pushed up from the outside. The pink curtains billow gently in the night breeze. Kate runs. She sprints back to the tapas restaurant, and the words that tear from her throat will echo in headlines around the world for the next 18 years. Madeleine's gone. Someone's taken her. Within minutes, the Ocean Club erupts into chaos. Resort staff fan out across the grounds with flashlights. Other guests join the search, calling Madeleine's name into the darkness. Jerry McCann runs through the streets of Praia da Luz, checking alleys, gardens, parked cars. The Portuguese police are called, then more police, then the media. By dawn, the world knows. A British toddler has vanished from a holiday apartment in Portugal. No ransom note, no witnesses, no clear trail. Just an open window, an empty bed, and 2-year-old twins still sleeping, unaware their sister is gone. The first 48 hours are a blur of flashing cameras and frantic searches. Portuguese Polícia Judiciária officers comb the resort and surrounding areas. Sniffer dogs are brought in. Helicopters sweep the coastline. Volunteers distribute posters bearing Madeleine's face. That distinctive coloboma in her right eye becomes a global symbol, a detail that can't be hidden or disguised. But the investigation stumbles almost immediately. The crime scene is compromised. Too many people have walked through apartment 5A. Fingerprints are smudged. Potential evidence is contaminated. Early theories swirl. Abduction by a stranger, a wandering child who got lost. Even whispers of parental involvement that will haunt Kate and Jerry for years. The McCanns refuse to leave Portugal. They launch a media campaign unlike anything the world has seen for a missing child. Celebrities make appeals. Posters appear in 25 languages. A fund is established, raising millions. The case becomes a phenomenon, dissected in newspapers, debated on television, obsessed over in online forums. But weeks turn into months, and Madeleine remains missing. No body, no confession, no breakthrough, just questions that multiply like shadows. And in those first frantic days, while the world's attention focused on the McCanns and the Ocean Club, one man was already watching the chaos unfold. A drifter, a predator, someone who knew the landscape of Praia da Luz better than most tourists ever would. Because here's what most people don't understand about this corner of Portugal. Praia da Luz isn't just a resort town. Step beyond the manicured villas and golf courses, and the Algarve reveals a different face. The Atalaia region, just northeast of the Ocean Club, is a patchwork of scrubland, abandoned farms, and forgotten infrastructure. Dry stone walls crumble into dust, water tanks rust in the sun, and wells, dozens of them, unmapped and undisturbed, dot the landscape like open mouths waiting to swallow secrets. This terrain doesn't forgive, it doesn't forget, but it does conceal. For someone familiar with these back roads and hidden places, someone who'd lived here, worked here, drifted through the margins of this tourist paradise, the Atalaia scrubland offered something invaluable: obscurity, a place where things, or people, could vanish. And one man knew this terrain intimately. Fast forward, 13 years, June 3rd, 2020. A press conference in Braunschweig, Germany. Prosecutors stand beneath harsh fluorescent lights, their faces grave. Behind them, a projection screen flickers to life, displaying photographs of a rugged man with cold eyes and a thin smile. Hans Christian Wolters, the lead prosecutor, speaks with measured precision. "We are investigating a 43-year-old German national on suspicion of murder in the case of Madeleine McCann. We have evidence that Madeleine is dead. We have a suspect. We are assuming that the girl is dead. The room erupts. After 13 years of dead ends and false leads, authorities have named a prime suspect. His name is Christian Brueckner, a convicted sex offender, a drifter who lived in the Algarve on and off between 1995 and 2007. And on the night of May 3, 2007, phone records place him within 1 kilometre of the Ocean Club resort. The evidence is circumstantial, but damning. At approximately 7:32 p.m. on the night Madeleine vanished, Brueckner received a 30-minute phone call on his Portuguese mobile. Cell tower triangulation puts him near Praia da Luz during that call. He owned 2 vehicles at the time, a distinctive 1993 Jaguar XJR6 and a Volkswagen T3 Westphalia camper van. Witnesses reported seeing a Jaguar matching that description parked near apartment 5A on the night of the disappearance. The day after Madeleine vanished, Brueckner re-registered the Jaguar to someone else in Germany. A week later, he left Portugal and never returned. But here's the detail that makes investigators certain they have the right man. In 2007, Brueckner was renting a small farmhouse in the Atalaia region. The property sat on scrubland, surrounded by olive groves and thorny undergrowth, and less than 600 meters from the Ocean Club resort, the same farmhouse that sits near the well they're draining in June 2025. Christian Brueckner is not some phantom. He's a documented predator with a history that reads like a prosecutor's nightmare. In 2005, 2 years before Madeleine vanished, he broke into the home of a 72-year-old American woman in Praia da Luz. He raped her, beat her, and stole from her. The case went unsolved for years until DNA evidence linked Brueckner to the crime in 2018. He was convicted in 2019 and sentenced to 7 years in prison. But that's not all. In February 2024, Brueckner stood trial in Braunschweig for 5 additional sexual offences committed in Portugal between 2000 and 2017. The charges included rape, sexual abuse of children, and sexual abuse of a teenage girl. He was convicted and sentenced to 17 years in prison. The pattern is undeniable. Brueckner preyed on vulnerable people in the Algarve for over a decade. He knew how to break into holiday apartments. He knew the back roads, the hiding places, the forgotten corners where no one looked. And he was there in Praia da Luz on the night Madeleine McCann disappeared. But here's the frustrating reality. Despite prosecutors' certainty, despite the circumstantial evidence, Christian Brueckner has never been formally charged with Madeleine's disappearance. German law requires an exceptionally high burden of proof for murder convictions, especially without a body. Prosecutors need more than phone records and vehicle sightings. They need physical evidence, a confession, something concrete that ties Brueckner directly to Madeleine. And that's why in May 2023, investigators made their first major move. They travelled 50 kilometres inland from Praia da Luz to the Barragem do Arade, a sprawling reservoir surrounded by dense forest. Among Brueckner's possessions, they'd found photographs of a secluded cove on the reservoir's edge, photographs that suggested familiarity, significance. For 3 days, divers plunged into the murky water. Cadaver dogs swept the shoreline. Ground-penetrating radar mapped the reservoir bed. The operation was meticulous, exhaustive, but when it ended, authorities announced no major findings, no body, no evidence, just more questions. But the reservoir search wasn't a failure. It was a rehearsal. It taught investigators how to conduct large-scale forensic searches in challenging terrain. It refined their techniques, their coordination between German and Portuguese authorities. And it confirmed something crucial. If Brueckner disposed of evidence, he did it somewhere he knew, somewhere familiar, somewhere close, somewhere like the well near his old farmhouse in Atalaia. Wells are forensic time capsules. Unlike open ground, where weather and scavengers can destroy evidence within days, wells offer still water, sediment layers, and enclosed environments that can preserve materials for years. Metal corrodes, but endures. Fibers lodge in crevices. Organic matter, while degraded, can still yield DNA under the right conditions. Modern technology, ground-penetrating radar, remotely operated vehicles, cadaver dogs trained to detect scent plumes rising from water, makes it possible to search these sites with precision. And for someone in a panic, someone who needed to hide something quickly and permanently, a well offers a terrible kind of logic. It's narrow, deep, and perceived as final. It's the kind of place a predator familiar with rural terrain would know about, would remember, would choose. So on June 3, 2025, investigators returned to Praia da Luz, not to the resort, not to the beaches, but to the scrubland of Atalaya, where the pumps now hum and the muddy water rises. For 3 days, forensic teams worked in shifts. Ground-penetrating radar mapped the well's interior before a single drop of water was removed. Cadaver dogs circled the perimeter, noses twitching, searching for scent plumes. Then the pumps roared to life and the well began to empty. On day 2, a diver descended into the shaft, visibility near zero, working by touch in the cold, silty darkness. Every object encountered was catalogued, photographed, and carefully extracted. Small items emerged, fragments of metal, pieces of fabric, animal bones. Each one was sealed in an evidence bag, numbered and prepared for transport to Germany for analysis. A no-fly zone kept media drones away. Authorities released no real-time updates. The world watched from a distance, waiting for a headline that never came. Because on June 5th, when the operation concluded, there was no dramatic announcement. No press conference declaring a breakthrough, just a terse statement. Samples had been recovered and sent to Germany for forensic analysis. Results would take time. And then silence. So was it a dead end? 3 days of pumping, searching, and sifting, only to come up empty? Not necessarily. Forensic analysis doesn't happen overnight. DNA degrades in water, but it doesn't always disappear. Trace fibers can be matched to textiles. Soil samples can reveal isotopic signatures. Even the absence of certain materials can tell investigators something valuable. The well may still speak, just not yet. But here's what we know for certain. 18 years after Madeleine McCann vanished, investigators are still searching. They haven't given up. They haven't moved on. They're draining wells, diving reservoirs, and combing scrubland because they believe, no, they're certain, that Christian Brueckner knows what happened to Madeleine. And somewhere, in a prison cell in Germany, Brueckner sits in silence. He's never confessed, never cooperated, never shown remorse. His lawyers maintain his innocence in Madeleine's case, even as he serves time for other horrific crimes. Meanwhile, Kate and Jerry McCann continue to wait. Their twins, Sean and Amelie, are now 20 years old, older than Madeleine ever got to be. The family has endured 18 years of hope and heartbreak, of searches that lead nowhere and leads that evaporate like morning mist. Every time investigators drain a well or search a reservoir, the McCanns hold their breath. Because closure, even the worst kind, is better than the endless not knowing. So let me ask you this. What would you do if your child vanished and the world moved on, but you couldn't? If every search brought hope and every silence brought agony? If the answer was out there somewhere, buried in the earth or hidden in the memory of a man who refuses to speak? Drop a comment and tell us. Do you think this well holds answers? Do you believe Christian Brueckner is responsible? And after 18 years, what would you search for if you were leading this investigation? If you're invested in this case, if you want to know what happens when those forensic results come back from Germany, hit that subscribe button right now. We're covering every development as it happens. This story isn't over, not by a long shot, because what they found at the bottom of that well might just change everything. The silence after a search is always the loudest part. 3 days of pumps and divers and evidence bags, and then nothing. No press conference, no breakthrough, just muddy water draining into the Portuguese soil and investigators packing their equipment in silence. But here's what most people don't understand about forensic investigations. The absence of an announcement doesn't mean the absence of evidence. It means the real work is just beginning. Because right now, in a laboratory somewhere in Germany, technicians are examining every fragment pulled from that well. Every fiber, every speck of sediment, every microscopic particle that might hold the answer to what happened on May 3rd, 2007. And if there's one thing 18 years of dead ends has taught investigators, it's this. Christian Brueckner doesn't leave obvious trails. He leaves whispers, shadows, the kind of evidence that only reveals itself under a microscope or inside a mass spectrometer. So while the world waits for results, let's talk about what investigators already know. Because the case against Brueckner isn't built on a single piece of evidence. It's built on a pattern, a web of movements, behaviors, and choices that all point to the same conclusion. And that web starts with a phone call, May 3, 2007. 7:32 p.m. Christian Brueckner's Portuguese mobile phone receives an incoming call. The conversation lasts 30 minutes. Cell tower records triangulate his location to within 1 kilometer of the Ocean Club resort in Praia da Luz. He's there, right there, in the window of time when Madeleine McCann is still sleeping peacefully in apartment 5A and her parents are sitting down to dinner 50 meters away. Now, a phone call isn't a crime. Being near a location isn't proof of guilt, but context is everything. And the context around Christian Brueckner in the spring of 2007 paints a very specific picture. He's broke. Desperately so. He's been living in the Algarve for over a decade, drifting between odd jobs, petty theft, and drug deals. He's been squatting in a rundown farmhouse in the Atalaya scrubland. No running water, no electricity, just him and the wilderness and whatever he can steal to survive. He's done time in German prisons for sexual offenses against children. He's committed burglaries across the Algarve, specifically targeting holiday apartments and homes of elderly tourists. And he knows Praia da Luz intimately. He knows which apartments have weak locks, which windows can be jimmied open, which streets have the fewest cameras. He's a predator who's learned the terrain, and in May 2007, he's hunting. But it's not just the phone call that places him near the Ocean Club, it's the vehicles. Brueckner owned 2 cars in 2007, and both of them are critical to understanding what investigators believe happened. The first is a 1993 Jaguar XJR6, a distinctive, high-performance sedan, dark in color, with German plates. It's not the kind of car you see every day in a small Portuguese resort town. It's memorable. And on the night of May 3rd, multiple witnesses reported seeing a Jaguar matching that exact description parked near apartment 5A. One witness, a British tourist, told police he saw the Jaguar parked suspiciously close to the McCann apartment between 9 and 10 p.m. Another witness recalled seeing a man standing near the vehicle, watching the apartment complex. The descriptions were vague, white male, medium build, but the car was unmistakable. And here's the detail that makes investigators' skin crawl. The very next day, May 4, 2007, Christian Brueckner re-registered the Jaguar to someone else. He transferred ownership to an acquaintance in Germany, effectively distancing himself from the vehicle within 24 hours of Madeleine's disappearance. Why would someone do that? Why would you suddenly, urgently, get rid of a car the day after a child vanishes from a location where your car was seen? The second vehicle is even more unsettling. Brueckner also owned a Volkswagen T3 Westphalia camper van, one of those boxy 1980s-era vans with a pop-up roof and curtained windows. It's a mobile home, a private, enclosed space, the kind of vehicle where you can transport something or someone without being seen. Witnesses reported seeing a similar camper van parked near the Ocean Club in the days leading up to Madeleine's disappearance. One witness described seeing a man sitting in the van, watching children play near the resort pool. Another recalled the van parked on a dirt road in the Atalaya scrubland, not far from Brueckner's farmhouse. Both vehicles have been forensically examined by German and Portuguese authorities. The results of those examinations have never been made public, but the fact that investigators keep returning to those vehicles, keep asking witnesses about them, keep analyzing records tied to them, tells you everything you need to know. They found something, or they're certain something was there. Now let's talk about the man himself. Because Christian Brueckner isn't some mysterious figure who appeared out of nowhere. He's a documented predator with a criminal history that spans 3 decades and 2 countries. Born in Germany in 1976, Brueckner's first known offense was at age 17, sexual abuse of a child. He served time in a German juvenile facility, and upon release, he drifted south. By the mid-1990s, he'd landed in Portugal, specifically the Algarve, where the warm weather, transient tourist population, and lax enforcement created the perfect environment for someone who wanted to disappear into the margins. For over a decade, Brueckner lived a shadow life. He worked occasional construction jobs, dealt drugs, committed burglaries. He squatted in abandoned properties, lived out of his camper van, and moved frequently to avoid detection. He had relationships with local women, some of whom later told investigators they feared him. One ex-girlfriend described him as controlling, violent, and obsessed with child abuse material. But it's his crimes, the ones we know about, that reveal the true scope of his depravity. In 2005, 2 years before Madeleine vanished, Christian Brueckner broke into the home of a 72-year-old American woman in Praia da Luz. It was late at night. She was alone. He wore a mask. He tied her up, raped her, beat her with a metal object, and ransacked her home, stealing money and valuables before disappearing into the night. The woman survived, but the case went cold. Portuguese police had no leads, no suspects, no DNA match in their databases. It wasn't until 2018, 13 years later, that advances in DNA technology and cross-border data sharing linked the crime to Christian Brueckner. He was arrested, tried and convicted in 2019, receiving a 7-year sentence. But that was just the beginning. As investigators dug deeper into Brueckner's past, they uncovered a pattern of sexual violence that spanned nearly 2 decades. Between 2000 and 2017, he committed at least 5 additional sexual offenses in Portugal: rapes, sexual abuse of children, and sexual abuse of a teenage girl. Some of the crimes were filmed. Brueckner kept videos, stored on USB drives and hard drives seized during raids on his properties. In February 2024, he stood trial in Braunschweig, Germany for those offenses. The evidence was overwhelming: victim testimony, DNA matches, video recordings. He was convicted and sentenced to 17 years in prison, to be served consecutively with his existing sentence. Christian Brueckner is currently behind bars, and he will be for a very long time. But he has never been charged with Madeleine McCann's disappearance. Why not? Because German law is unforgiving when it comes to murder convictions. Prosecutors need more than circumstantial evidence. They need physical proof: DNA, a body, a confession, something concrete that ties the suspect directly to the victim. And despite years of investigation, despite the phone records and the vehicles and the proximity, they don't have that final piece. Not yet. But Hans Christian Wolters, the lead prosecutor in Braunschweig, has said something remarkable. In multiple interviews since 2020, he stated with absolute certainty, "We have evidence that Madeleine McCann is dead. We know who killed her." Not, "we suspect." Not, "we believe." We know. So what evidence do they have that the public doesn't? What are German prosecutors holding back? The answer is we don't know, and that's by design. German law allows prosecutors to withhold evidence during ongoing investigations to protect the integrity of the case: witness statements, forensic results, intercepted communications. All of it can be sealed until charges are filed. But there are clues, breadcrumbs that investigators have dropped in interviews and court filings. One clue comes from a witness, a man who knew Brueckner in 2007. According to reports, this witness claims that Brueckner confessed to him in a bar, years after Madeleine's disappearance. The alleged confession was vague but chilling. Brueckner supposedly said he took a child from Praia da Luz and implied that she didn't scream. The witness didn't come forward immediately. He waited years, and when he finally did, his credibility was questioned. But German prosecutors believe him. They've corroborated parts of his story, cross-referenced timelines, and deemed his testimony reliable enough to build a case around. Another clue comes from Brueckner's own behavior. In the days and weeks after Madeleine vanished, he changed his patterns. He left Portugal abruptly in mid-2007, moving back to Germany. He sold or transferred his vehicles. He avoided contact with people who knew him in the Algarve. It's the behavior of someone running, someone who knows the walls are closing in. And then there's the digital evidence. When German authorities raided Brueckner's properties in 2016 and 2018, they seized computers, hard drives, USB sticks, and memory cards. On those devices, they found thousands of images and videos, child abuse material, recordings of his own crimes, and photographs of locations in Portugal. Among those photographs were images of the arrayed reservoir, the same reservoir investigators searched in May 2023, the same reservoir where Brueckner was known to camp and spend time alone. Why would someone keep photographs of a remote reservoir? What significance did that place hold? Investigators believe it was a disposal site, a place Brueckner used to hide evidence of his crimes, and while the 2023 search of the reservoir didn't yield Madeleine's remains, it did something equally important. It confirmed that Brueckner was methodical. He planned. He scouted locations. He knew where to hide things. And if he used the reservoir, what else did he use? What other forgotten, isolated places in the Algarve did he know about? That's why 2 years later they came back to drain the well. The well near Brueckner's old farmhouse in Atalaya isn't random. It's strategic. It's less than 600 meters from the Ocean Club. It's on property Brueckner had access to. It's surrounded by scrubland that offers cover and isolation, and it's the kind of place that, in a moment of panic, a predator might choose. Because here's the psychological profile investigators are working with. Christian Brueckner is not a sophisticated criminal mastermind. He's impulsive, opportunistic, and driven by compulsion. His crimes are marked by violence and a lack of long-term planning. He acts on urges, and then he scrambles to cover his tracks. On the night of May 3, 2007, if Brueckner abducted Madeleine McCann, he would have had a very narrow window to act. The McCanns were checking on their children every 30 minutes. The resort was full of guests. The streets of Praia da Luz, while quiet, were not deserted. So what would he do? Where would he go? He'd go somewhere familiar, somewhere close, somewhere he'd been before and knew he wouldn't be seen. He'd go to the scrubland, to the farmhouse, to the well. And if that's true, if Madeleine's remains are at the bottom of that well, then the samples currently being analyzed in Germany could be the breakthrough investigators have been waiting 18 years for. But there's another possibility, one that's harder to accept but impossible to ignore. What if the well is empty? What if Brueckner used a different location entirely? What if the evidence has degraded beyond recognition or was never there to begin with? Then the case remains in limbo. Brueckner stays in prison for his other crimes, but he's never charged with Madeleine's murder. The McCanns never get closure, and the world is left with the same haunting question it's been asking since 2007. What happened to Madeleine? Here's what keeps investigators up at night. They're certain they have the right man. The phone records, the vehicles, the criminal history, the witness statements, it all points to Christian Brueckner, but certainty isn't proof, and without proof, there's no justice. So they keep searching, they keep draining wells and diving reservoirs and combing scrubland, because giving up isn't an option. Because somewhere, buried in the earth, or hidden in the memory of a man who refuses to speak, the truth is waiting. And the clock is ticking. Brueckner is 48 years old. He's serving a long sentence, but he's not serving life. Eventually, he could be released. And if that happens before he's charged with Madeleine's murder, he walks free from that crime. That's the nightmare scenario. That's what drives prosecutors to keep building their case, piece by painstaking piece. But here's the question that should terrify all of us. If Christian Brueckner did this, if he abducted and killed a 3-year-old girl and got away with it for 18 years, how many other crimes did he commit that we don't know about? Because predators like Brueckner don't stop. They escalate, they refine, they move from place to place, leaving victims in their wake. Investigators are now looking at unsolved cases across Europe, missing children, unsolved sexual assaults, cold cases in Germany, Portugal, and beyond. They're comparing timelines, cross-referencing locations, searching for patterns, and they're finding them. So let me ask you this. Do you think Christian Brueckner is responsible for Madeleine's disappearance? Do you believe the well holds answers? Or is this just another dead end in a case full of them? And if you were leading this investigation, what would you do next? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Tell us what you think happened. Tell us where you'd search. Because this case isn't just about one missing child. It's about how we pursue justice when the evidence is buried, the suspect is silent, and time is running out. If you want to stay updated on every development in this case, if you want to know the moment those forensic results come back from Germany, Smash that like button and let us know you're paying attention. The algorithm rewards engagement, and engagement keeps cases like Madeleine's in the public eye, so comment, share, and make sure this story doesn't fade into the background, because the McCanns are still waiting, investigators are still searching, and somewhere, in a prison cell in Germany, Christian Brueckner is still silent. But silence doesn't last forever, and when it breaks, when the truth finally comes out, we'll be here to cover it. Stay with us, because Act 3 is where everything converges. And you won't want to miss what happens next. The truth is an equation with missing variables. Evidence plus time plus pressure equals justice. But what happens when one of those variables remains unsolved? June 2025. The pumps have gone silent. The well in Atalaya has been drained, searched and documented. Forensic teams have packed their equipment and returned to their labs in Germany and Portugal. The media has moved on to the next headline, and the world is left waiting for an answer that may never come in the form we expect. Because here's what nobody tells you about cold cases that suddenly heat up. The resolution is rarely dramatic. There's no courtroom confession, no tearful admission, no detective standing in the rain, holding the one piece of evidence that changes everything. Real investigations end in lab reports, legal filings, and carefully worded press releases that leave more questions than they answer. So what did the well reveal? The official statement from Portuguese authorities was brief and frustratingly vague. Several small items and animal bones were recovered and sent to Germany for forensic analysis. Results pending. No further comment. That's it. That's all we know. But let's talk about what results pending actually means in forensic terms. Because the absence of a headline doesn't mean the absence of progress. DNA analysis of degraded samples can take months. Water accelerates decomposition, but it doesn't erase everything. Bone fragments, even small ones, can yield mitochondrial DNA. Fabric fibers can be matched to clothing databases. Soil samples can reveal isotopic signatures that indicate where something or someone has been. Even trace metals from jewelry or personal items can be identified years after submersion. The items pulled from that well are currently under microscopes, inside mass spectrometers, being examined by forensic experts who understand that justice often hides in particles invisible to the naked eye. And while we wait for those results, the larger question looms: is this well the answer, or just another chapter in an investigation that has no ending? Let's step back and look at the full picture, because the Madeleine McCann case isn't just about one well or one suspect. It's about the architecture of a mystery that has resisted resolution for 18 years. Christian Brueckner remains the prime suspect. German prosecutors remain certain of his guilt. But certainty and proof are not the same thing. And in the eyes of the law, Brueckner is innocent of Madeleine's disappearance until proven otherwise. His defense team has been vocal. They argue that the case against him is entirely circumstantial. Phone records place him near Praia da Luz, but they don't place him inside apartment 5A. Witnesses saw a Jaguar, but they didn't see Brueckner driving it. The well search produced items, but none have been publicly linked to Madeleine. And Brueckner himself, he said nothing. He's exercised his right to silence, refusing to cooperate with investigators, refusing to confirm or deny anything. In Germany, that silence cannot be used against him in court. Prosecutors must build their case without his words, so they're building it with everything else. Behind the scenes, a massive coordination effort is underway. The German Federal Criminal Police, the BKA, is working with Portugal's Polícia Judiciária and the UK's Metropolitan Police under a framework called the European Investigation Order. This legal instrument allows cross-border evidence sharing, joint operations, and unified forensic analysis. It's a bureaucratic ballet, and it's slow, but it's thorough. In Berlin, analysts are reviewing every piece of digital evidence seized from Brueckner's properties. In Lisbon, investigators are re-interviewing witnesses from 2007, asking new questions based on new information. In London, Operation Grange, the UK's long-running investigation into Madeleine's disappearance, is providing intelligence support, cross-referencing timelines, and keeping the McCann family informed. This is not a case that has been abandoned. It's a case that is being built brick by brick. with the patience of people who know they only get one chance to get it right. But patience has a cost, and that cost is measured in years of waiting, years of hope deferred, years of living in the space between knowing and proving. For Kate and Gerry McCann, 18 years is a lifetime. Their daughter vanished when she was 3 years old. If she were alive today, she would be 21, an adult, old enough to vote, to travel, to build a life of her own. But Madeleine never got that chance, and her parents have spent nearly 2 decades in a kind of suspended grief, unable to mourn fully because there's no body, unable to hope fully because there's no evidence she's alive. In public statements, the McCanns have expressed gratitude for the ongoing investigation. They've thanked the authorities in Germany, Portugal, and the UK. They've said they want answers, whatever those answers may be. But between the lines of those carefully worded statements, you can feel the exhaustion, the weight of 18 years of searching. Their twins, Sean and Amelie, are now 20 years old. They were 2 when their sister disappeared. They have no memory of her. They've grown up in the shadow of the world's most famous missing child case, their lives shaped by an absence they can't remember. How do you move forward when the past refuses to resolve? That's the question the McCanns live with every day, and it's the question that haunts every family of a missing person. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. Madeleine McCann's case is an outlier. It has received more media attention, more investigative resources, and more public interest than almost any missing child case in modern history. Millions of pounds have been spent. Thousands of leads have been pursued, and still there's no resolution. Now imagine being the family of a missing child who doesn't get that attention, who doesn't get the resources, who doesn't get the headlines. Every year, thousands of children go missing around the world. Most are found within hours or days, but some aren't. Some disappear into the same void that swallowed Madeleine, and their families are left with the same agonizing questions and far fewer answers. The disparity is stark and uncomfortable. Madeleine McCann was a white, middle-class British child who vanished from a resort in Europe. Her case became a global phenomenon, but children of colour, children from low-income families, children from marginalised communities, they disappear too, and their cases rarely make it past the local news. This isn't a criticism of the McCanns or the investigators working on Madeleine's case. It's an acknowledgement of a systemic failure. A recognition that our attention is selective, our resources are finite, and our empathy is often shaped by proximity and privilege. Every missing child deserves the same level of investigation, the same forensic analysis, the same refusal to give up. But that's not the world we live in. Not yet. So what do we do with that knowledge? How do we honour Madeleine's case without ignoring the thousands of others? We start by paying attention, by amplifying the cases that don't get headlines, by demanding that law enforcement agencies allocate resources equitably, by supporting organisations that advocate for missing and exploited children, regardless of their background. And we refuse to let cases go cold just because they're no longer trending. Because the truth is, the Madeleine McCann investigation has done something important, even if it hasn't yet brought her home. It's demonstrated that cold cases can be revived, that advances in forensic science can unlock evidence that was invisible a decade ago, that international cooperation, when done right, can transcend borders and bureaucracies. The techniques refined in this case, ground-penetrating radar, cadaver dog scent plume analysis, isotopic soil matching, genetic genealogy, are now being applied to other investigations. The legal frameworks established through the European Investigation Order are being used to solve other cross-border crimes. Madeleine's case has become a blueprint, not for closure necessarily, but for persistence. And persistence matters, because even when the earth keeps its secrets, the act of searching sends a message. We don't forget. We don't give up. We don't let predators hide in silence. Christian Brueckner is in prison. He will be for many years. Even if he's never charged with Madeleine's disappearance, he will not walk free from his other crimes. The women and children he victimized have seen justice, even if the McCanns have not. But the investigation continues. The forensic analysis continues. The search for that final piece of evidence continues. And maybe that's the real answer to the equation. Maybe justice isn't a single moment of resolution. Maybe it's the refusal to stop searching, even when the odds are impossible. So where does that leave us? The well in Atalaya is empty now. The water has been drained, the sediment sifted, the samples sent away. In a few months or maybe a year we'll get a report. It will say whether the items recovered are significant, whether they're connected to Madeleine, whether they change anything. Or it will say nothing conclusive was found and the search will continue elsewhere. Either way, the story doesn't end. Because the story of Madeleine McCann isn't just about one night in 2007. It's about what happens after. It's about the investigators who refuse to close the file, the parents who refuse to stop hoping, the public that refuses to forget. It's about the wells we drain, the reservoirs we search, the scrubland we comb, looking for answers that may be buried too deep to find. But here's what I believe. The truth has a way of surfacing, not always when we want it to, not always in the form we expect. But eventually, the earth gives up its secrets. Sometimes it takes 18 years, sometimes it takes longer. But history is patient, and so are the people who seek justice. So let me ask you one final question. If you were investigating this case, where would you search next? What question would you ask that hasn't been asked? What piece of evidence do you think is still out there, waiting to be found? Drop your answer in the comments. Tell us what you think happened. Tell us where the investigation should go from here. Because your engagement, your comments, your shares, your refusal to let this case fade into the background keeps it alive. It keeps pressure on investigators. It keeps Madeleine's name in the public consciousness. And that matters more than you might think. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because when there's a break in this case, and there will be, you'll be the first to know. We're not going anywhere. We're staying on this story until there's an answer. And while you're here, tell us, what case should we cover next? What unsolved mystery deserves the same attention, the same resources, the same refusal to give up? Drop the name in the comments and we'll investigate. Because this is criminal instinct. We don't forget, we don't stop asking, and we never stop searching for the truth. Madeleine McCann is still missing, but she's not forgotten. And as long as people keep searching, keep questioning, keep demanding answers, there's still hope. Not the hope that she'll walk through the door. That hope died years ago, buried under the weight of evidence and time. But the hope that one day the equation will be solved, the variables will align, and the truth, whatever it is, will finally come to light. Until then, we search, we wait, and we remember. This is criminal instinct. Thank you for watching, and thank you for caring. Now go, comment, share, keep this story alive. Because the moment we stop paying attention is the moment cases like this go cold forever. And we're not letting that happen. Not today, not ever.